Connor, Armando, welcome, guys. Thanks for coming on and talking with us.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah.
We're excited. This is what we love to do, create content, edit videos, and we'll kind of show you our workflow and talk a little bit about the Mac Pro, which is awesome.
Should be fun. Should be fun.
Awesome. So I'll kick it over to you guys.
Cool. So we'll talk a little bit just before we get into the workflow. We'll talk more why we decided to go with the Mac Pro, especially there's a lot of options today. I mean, you can go PC, you can go even a MacBook Pro or, laptop.
Or even iMac.
Yeah, there's just many options. The reason, and it's funny, if you're not familiar with my channel, I have a YouTube channel. I had a lot of issues running Premiere Pro on a PC, mainly because you got to understand when you buy a PC or you build a PC, there's endless of combinations. You can pick an Intel processor, you can pick an AMD processor with different graphics cards. When you mix and match RAM and all these different components, you end up with millions of different configurations. And what that means for a software company like Adobe or DaVinci Resolve, it means that they have to optimize their software to work in many different ways. With the Apple ecosystem, I mean, they only have a handful of computers, different types of configurations. So for the most part, in our experience, it has worked well. Now, the Mac Pro is new in the sense that, the older, we'll call it the trash can style that most people, remember that style, the older Mac Pro. It was pretty outdated. So when the new Mac Pro came out, we were pretty excited because, for one, it's modular.
Yeah.
That's something that the other Mac Pro didn't have. So that was really important to us. In fact, we upgraded the RAM on our current Mac Pro to take more advantage of what we do. Also, you can build it out. It's really quiet.
Yeah.
And the things that sometimes we're doing voiceovers, you can't really hear anything. The thing is amazing. But yeah, I think that was really a big reason why we ended up going with the Mac Pro, aside from it being very powerful. The workflow that we have is really interesting because we actually use a server. So we don't store anything locally here because we actually edit on multiple machines. So everything is on a server. And I've actually done a video if you're interested in taking a look at that. I won't go into too much detail about it, but there is a video on my channel that talks about the workflow. Mainly because we use Final Cut Pro, we use Premiere Pro, we use DaVinci Resolve. And that's another reason why we wanted to use Mac, is because we have the ability to use any platform, because it's not just what we do on our channel. We also work with other filmmakers. We've done short films, we've done other projects with other collaborators, and a lot of times they end up using Final Cut Pro. Connor is my editor, so he's well-versed in basically mostly all NLEs, I'll say.
Yeah,
most of them. Yeah, most of them. DaVinci, not too much, but I know he actually, when I hired Connor, he came more from Final Cut. That was the primary NLE of his choice at that time. I was a Premiere Pro user, but that's the beauty of using Mac, is that you can use Final Cut. You can't use Final Cut in a PC.
Yeah, you're not limited.
No. So we have a server setup that we're using right now that allows us to use a PC. It allows us to use a Mac Pro, and all of our storage is there. And going back to the whole Mac Pro, it has a 10 gigabit Ethernet connection. So we're able to edit 6K, 8K raw footage directly from our server. And we have roughly about 128 terabytes of storage. But now in terms of the workflow part, I'm gonna turn it over to Connor, because he's the one that does most of my video editing. I do the coloring, so he basically lays everything out, and then I'll end up doing the coloring. But if you want to talk about how.
Sure. And that's also why the server is so nice, because I can edit everything over on the Mac Pro, and then I can send it over to his computer with his color calibrated monitor so that he can color grade it to his perfectionist ways. It's very good. He's good at what he does. But I'm going to go ahead and switch this over to Premiere, because we kind of have a little demo here set up for you guys so that we can show you how we utilize the Mac Pro, but also how we utilize ProRes, because ProRes is developed by Mac. So when you're using, actually, let me switch back to our camera, because when you're using the Mac Pro, it's really awesome to also use ProRes, because everything is optimized by Apple, which means everything is going to run as smoothly as possible. Now, ProRes is usable on PC now, which is great. But again, it definitely runs better on Apple-based products. So that's really cool. So let me go back over into Premiere now and kind of show you what we have set up. So this is actually a project that we shot about a year ago. We did a shoot with Nikon, and we shot this using the Nikon Z6 and the Atomos Ninja 5 using ProRes, which was really awesome. And I'm just going to go ahead and just hit play so that you guys can see it rocking and rolling here. What's really
playback. Sorry.
Yeah, and as you can see, it is running in full playback, which is really awesome. And we're not going to get, as you can see by our frame drop indicator right here, we're not getting any frames dropped. This is a pretty chunky edit, as I like to say. There's a lot of stuff going on. We have a lot of sound design, tons of color grades, lots of different clips here. And the Mac Pro using ProRes is able to handle it like a champ, no issues at all. And this isn't even in Final Cut. This is in Adobe. So we're not using an all Mac ecosystem, which technically if we were in Final Cut, it should run even smoother than that, which is really awesome. But we do have some other stuff kind of set up for you guys here so we can go further in depth into how ProRes is working for us. So right here we have our 8K demo. This is 4 streams of 4K footage. Now, just to show you guys exactly what we're working with here, if I go here, this was shot on a Arri Alexa Mini. This is Apple ProRes 444XQ. This is 12-bit. And if I go over here and I hit, let me move this a little bit out of the way. If I go over to our timeline and hit play, we're actually able to do 4 streams of 4K 444 12-bit, and it's able to play without any frame drops, which is pretty incredible, actually. I don't know what you would be using this for. This is a little bit of an extreme example, but this is pretty cool stuff that we're able to now get using ProRes, which is pretty awesome. And then if I come over to here, we actually have, let me pull up the properties of this for you guys. Here we have 4K. Now this is Canon. This is Canon
raw
light. And this is the same thing, 4 streams of 4K in Canon raw light. And if I hit play,
I mean, credit. It's really good. You see, already turned yellow because raw frames. I know frame 42 frames.
Just throughout the entire clip.
And look at that. I mean, it's definitely usable, but there's frames.
Yeah, we do the Mac Pro's credit. It's a super powerful computer. I mean, this is again a 8K timeline that we're working with, 4 streams of 4K. I mean, this is pretty intensive stuff. If I tried this on my MacBook, it might catch fire. And again, we have plenty of examples here. So if I come over here, we have, this is our 6K raw example. Now, Armando, if you want to go ahead and just kind of set this one up and talk about what this was that we were working on.
Yeah, so this example here is a short film that we helped in a couple of months ago.
Yeah.
And typically the workflow that we try to have, especially when we're working with these cameras like the Canon C500 that we're actually using this right now to stream with, and they have like a 6K raw capability. What we try to do is when we're done filming, typically at the end of the day, we'll ingest the footage into our server, and then we create what's called a watch folder. And what happens is any footage that gets inserted into this watch folder will automatically get transcoded into an Apple ProRes codec. And what that means is the next day, the following day, that when we come back and begin to edit, everything just works so great. And the thing is, and the reason why we do it overnight, it's not that it takes that long. In fact, typically on projects that we work on, usually depending on how much we shoot, of course, but I would say anywhere between 15 to 30 minutes. And again, that's because the Mac Pro is just really powerful and it can transcode those files really quick. Usually during a 12, 14-hour shoot day though, we are not gonna go into editing, so we just kind of let it happen overnight. And then the following day, now we have ProRes file. And the beauty of this is when we're working with multiple collaborators, because especially like Connor mentioned on that short film, we had VFX artists, we had people doing sound design, we just had a lot of people working on the project that we had to send footage out. So when we send over footage that is in a codec that plays really well on computers, especially on an Apple ecosystem, which most of the people that right now that we work with own Macs, it just runs really, really great, because I don't expect everyone to own a Mac Pro. But yeah, so this particular example here that he's about to show you is Canon 6K RAW, and you can show them the resolution really quick on the sequence setting.
1 second, sorry, I have these still open up. And properties.
So this one here, this one's a converted file. So this is an Apple ProRes 444. So we converted this particular clip, and the resolution is a 6K C500. And then go ahead and play that one so they can see. You have to hit that.
Yeah. Here you go.
So you'll see our frame rate drop indicator. No frame drops. It's playing back full playback. Yeah. And this is all 6K. We could just let most of the whole clip play. And then if we go over to the other clip, which is the Canon RAW Lite. Now understand that
zero compression.
Yeah, zero compression. They also understand too that Canon RAW Lite isn't fully optimized in Premiere Pro, but you'll notice that when we play it back right now, which go ahead and play, it's not going to be happy.
It's already not happy. Starting to play.
Yeah. We're dropping
101 frames, 136, 173. It's really quick on how many frames.
And this is not with, keep in mind, this is just 2 on. By the time you start color adjustment layers, sound design, that frame rate drop indicator is going to be even worse.
Yeah, and the good thing about ProRes and how this is working with our workflow is that it's able to significantly speed up our edit times. For instance, when I was trying to play the Canon footage from our previous example, I don't know if you guys noticed, because we're doing this through live, so there's probably some sort of delay or lag already, so I'm not sure how smooth it appears to you guys. But when I hit play on the ProRes footage, it plays immediately, which is, it doesn't sound like a big deal, but it is a big deal, because when I hit play on the Canon footage, I get like a roughly 3-second delay. And if you think about when you're video editing, think about how many times you hit the play button. I mean, the play button is how you watch what you've done. So you make adjustments, you hit play, you make adjustments, you hit play. And if every single time you hit play, 1,000 times, 2,000 times an edit, and there's a 3-second delay, you start to get into significant time loss. So having the Mac Pro with ProRes in that instant playback is kind of a big deal. When I edit at home, because occasionally I can't edit in Armando Studio, especially with what's been going on in the world lately, my MacBook Pro is it's not gonna keep up with what this beautiful machine, the Mac Pro, can. And I'm getting, if I don't bother to transcode it into ProRes, which is just out of pure laziness, I can get up to like 8, 11, 13 seconds of delay from the time I hit the space bar. And it'll take me a lot longer to edit than is ever necessary. So the ProRes workflow is pretty incredible. And I don't know if it's necessary, but I think I might go into a little bit of what ProRes is and how it functions and why it's different, if that's okay. And just to keep myself on track here, I did write a couple of notes so that I make sure that I say things correctly for you guys, because I don't want to misspeak.
Yeah, go ahead.
If that sounds okay. So ProRes, so you guys know, is a minimally compressed video file. So essentially what it's doing is instead of like a H.264 file, which is a very, very popular file, which is much, much more compressed, it is minimally compressed. And what that means is that your editor, your computer, is having to do less decoding in order to play the file. And that's how we're able to get such crazy playback speeds and also pre-render and rendering speeds. It's significantly faster in that. So basically what you're doing is you're reducing your GPU overhead, is another way to put it. Another thing about ProRes is that it is a 12-bit and higher codec. So you're getting a much wider gambit of colors information. So it's a very, very high quality file. In fact, Armando, you were doing a test earlier between ProRes and RAW. And what did you discover?
So a lot of people think that when you convert a RAW file over to like a ProRes file, is that you're going to lose those RAW capabilities, right? Because that's like the beauty of shooting RAW. If you're not familiar with RAW in general, because there might be people out there that are not familiar with RAW video, it's very similar to the RAW in photography, where you're able to adjust the white balance, you're able to adjust the ISO. And a lot of people feel that once you do that conversion, you lose those RAW values. But in fact, I've done tests where I've taken Canon, C500, C200, converted it over to RAW, pushed the color grade, or excuse me, converted to ProRes, yes. And I pushed the color grade to the point where I should be able to see a difference. And I'm looking at the image side by side, and I don't see an image. And that's kind of why a lot of people, especially shooting commercial projects, for the most part, especially when they're using the Arri Alexa Mini, they like to shoot ProRes, because with ProRes, especially 444, it's almost like you get the beauty of RAW without being RAW, because you can really push and pull the image. And again, in my testing, I've never felt that I was really missing the RAW capabilities. Again, I can't even say it was even 1%, but even if I did lose a few percentage, I would gladly trade that for a faster, speed. And the thing about now, and like Connor mentioned about the ProRes being 10-bit and above, is that we're moving now to a world where 4K is obviously the norm, but now we're pushing to 6K. Connor just got the Fuji X-T4, which shoots internal 10-bit.
It does.
A lot of cameras today are shooting internal 10-bit and an H.265 codec. When you mess with H.265, if anybody's out there and might know this, but if you're messing with H.265, it's not fun. It's, in fact, probably even worse than RAW sometimes.
Well, I don't know about that, but it's a very clunky, chunky kind of codec for some reason. And it has to do with how it's being compressed.
Right.
Which, of course, ProRes, which is also 10-bit. H.265, people who don't know, is a 10-bit. It's the 10-bit version of H.264. A lot of numbers, a lot of letters, but hopefully that makes sense. ProRes is like the equivalent of 265, but it is slightly less compressed. And so you're getting a little bit bigger files. That is the trade-off. However, you're retaining stupendous quality, and your computer is able to run it much more smoothly, which, in my opinion, is a wonderful trade-off.
Absolutely.
Another thing that is interesting about ProRes, because it is a 10-bit color space, is that you can actually take, for instance, let's say I shoot something on my Fujifilm X-T4, like we mentioned, and I decide to shoot 8-bit for some reason. I can actually take my 8-bit H.264 and convert it to ProRes 10-bit. Now, it's not a true 10-bit, but I'm actually able to get smoother color grading capabilities in this ProRes 10-bit codec once I convert it over, which is really interesting. So actually, if you're shooting cameras that don't have 10-bit capabilities, but you do have the ability to convert it over to ProRes, I would really highly suggest that, because it actually is going to make your color grading and also your editing workflow smoother, especially, again, if you're on a Mac ecosystem. We talk a lot about Mac ecosystem. That's probably because it's our favorite.
It's odd, but even right now, I mean, it sounds silly, but I have my AirPods. He has his AirPods. We're literally communicating, listening, using two different AirPods. It's just ecosystem. I know Connor occasionally uses the iPad also for editing. Many times because we do social media stuff, or sometimes there's times where we don't have our cameras, or if we don't want to use our cameras, we're using the iPhone, and I can airdrop stuff.
Yeah.
A lot of times because of social media, Connor creates different edits. So there's edits for Instagram, there's edits for Twitter. So as he's editing, he can create an Instagram only clip. He can airdrop it to me on the iPhone. The ecosystem is really beautiful, and that's again another reason why we decided to go with the Mac Pro.
Yeah. So, and to that credit, before we did have the Mac Pro and we were only on the PC, the amount of time, like, you don't think about it until you're forced to think about it. The amount of times that we wanted to airdrop something, especially for us because we're creating a lot of online content, the amount of times that we wanted to airdrop something from or to his PC, it's impossible. It's just, it's not something that you can do. And it turns into this really weird workaround where we're ending up Dropboxing,
created a Mac folder, and it's like syncing. And
it creates like it's a really cumbersome workflow, and everything takes 10 minutes, 20 minutes longer than it needs to. And again, that really matters, especially when you're in the online space, because we're pumping out significantly more content than, say, a typical cinematographer would necessarily have to. So that's really important. And to what we were talking about with occasionally editing with the iPad, I can go ahead and demo that just a little bit on maybe what that use could be. So I'll switch back over to Premiere right here. Perfect. And what could be, let me get off of that raw file so that the computer can catch up with itself. Something that is really useful that I can do with the iPad now, which is semi-new, is I can, excuse me, sorry, I'm clicking the wrong buttons here. I want to reveal in project. I can do what's called sidecar. So let's say, for instance, I want to just have something down and out of the way on my iPad from here to be able to clear up some of this space for whatever I want. So say I'm color grading and I go into my color grading tab and I want to have all of this with this nice and big, but I want to still be able to have my clip preview bigger than it is right now. So what I can do is I can actually pull off, excuse me, I can pull this off and down over to my iPad. And
they probably can't see this because
no, they cannot. I'll switch it over to the camera view so that you guys can see what I'm doing here in just a moment. Excuse me, because I kind of flubbed this. There we go. So let me go ahead and switch over to the other view here.
Yeah, not a problem. Actually, had a question for you guys regarding the customization. Is this a customizable, or what kind of options are people looking at? How much leeway do they have and kind of play with the system?
Can you repeat that for us, please? Do you mean like
yeah, as far as the Mac Pro and
with like the modularity?
Exactly.
Yeah. So I mean, the new Mac Pro, I would say it's. I mean, obviously, it's very modular. It really caters to obviously creative. So if I know a lot of people that use it for like making music, creating music. So they can integrate. I'm not into the whole music thing, so I wouldn't know exactly what it would be called. But I guess like different types of cards, different types of configuration for like audio. There we go. So the depending on what you're doing, that's the beauty of the modularity of it. It's like, I guess it's no different than a PC that you can buy components,
which is kind of cool because that's something that we've been asking for with the Mac ecosystem. Yes, it is a great ecosystem. It's a what we like to call what's the word? It's like a closed ecosystem. So everything is contained within itself, which has its benefits and disadvantages as well. The disadvantages was being able to do modular components to your Mac system. The benefits of it is that everything is in a closed system, so everything can be critically optimized so that everything is running at max potential constantly, which of course is why a lot of people end up choosing Mac for creative workspaces.
Right, and that's what we talked about earlier about the software optimization. If there's bugs in code, it's easier to identify what's wrong with it because there's only certain configurations that you can go with. I mean, there's only a certain amount of processors available on the Mac, or the Mac configurations on the Mac Pro. There's only a certain amount of components, as opposed to a PC, where if you have a crash, it could be your graphics card that's causing this crash. But trying to dial that in, it could be, it's a problem. And when we're dealing with, like, in certain cases, like time critical projects where we need to get them out, we can't afford to just have things crash and not be reliable, and that's an issue. So
definitely. Okay, so now that I have this figured out, sorry about that hiccup for a second, guys. But as I can move this over so you guys can see. So this is actually running Premiere on the iPad wirelessly through here. So actually, if I move my mouse down, I'm going to try to do this. Oh, there's my mouse. This is so trippy.
It's like backwards.
I don't know if you guys can see it or not because there's a glare, but my mouse is actually
there. It is
on the iPad right now, and I'm able to control whatever I decide to move down onto the iPad. So for instance, this is my clip preview screen. So I'm able to, let me switch it back over to, hopefully we don't have a weird fluke again. I'm able to switch it over to my preview. So if I'm like, oh, I need to look at this clip for some reason, it's being transited down to my iPad, and it's not cluttering up my top here window. So for instance, if I want to put on my Lumetri scopes and still have my clip preview, I'm not losing any screen real estate. And this is pretty amazing, and it's something actually that I need to remind myself that I can do, because a lot of times I'll forget that this is even a possibility in the moment, because I'm just like, all right, time to edit, let's go. I don't, put the footage over into Premiere, I'll just kind of get to work. But this is a really handy tool. You could also move your color wheels down here. Anything that is windowable in Premiere can be moved down to the iPad to create a really awesome workspace. Now, I haven't used this in other Adobe softwares, but I imagine for instance, Illustrator, you could use the Apple Pen and Illustrator to be able to draw on the iPad and still have all the other Illustrator tools or whatever else you need on your main screen, or maybe like a bigger preview up here, but you're still able to draw down on your iPad. There's really cool practical uses for Sidecar and how that all functions in the Apple ecosystem.
Now we had another question come in from Charles regarding Final Cut Pro 10. Do you guys have any examples you can show?
Yeah, sure, go for
Perfect.
it.
Sure. Yeah. I do have. Give me 1 second. There we go. I have Final Cut here. What we did is I did a mock edit of the Nikon shoot that we were talking about in Final Cut. So give me 1 second. I got to reopen the. We were having some slight issues with that today. I'm not really sure why. Give me one second.
No worries. And just to double down what the guys said, for anyone who is viewing, because of the bandwidth restrictions on Zoom, if the video does come through a little choppy on your end, I can assure you it is a bandwidth issue with just the webinar, the nature of doing webinars, and the high bandwidth it requires to transfer the information.
Yeah, we have a lot of things running right now that maybe shouldn't work. We spent an entire day trying to figure out how to get OBS to work with Zoom, to work with Premiere, to work with Final Cut, to work with everything all at the same time. So,
and we're not online streamers, so this is like new to
we're YouTube content creators. But what we have here is the same Apple ProRes footage, and I mean, of course, in Final Cut, which is Apple upon Apple upon Apple here. It's as closed system as you can get, pretty much. It's, of course, runs amazingly smooth. This has a very basic grade on it. We did not spend too much time grading this. This is not our main editor of choice. That's just because we, for our own personal sake, enjoy the Adobe program workflows. For instance, I use Audition, and I use Premiere and other Adobe software such as that. So it makes more sense for our workflow to be in Adobe. However, if a lot of people are editing in Final Cut these days, and for good reason, it is a really great quick software. If you're wanting to have the quickest possible turnarounds on your edits, I firmly believe that there's no better software than Final Cut, especially if you're running on Mac. So to clarify, before I worked with Armando, I was editing in Final Cut, and also my previous employer was editing on Final Cut. And he had a 2016 MacBook.
An old
MacBook.
MacBook.
I don't even think it was a Pro. And we were editing 4K, ProRes, or just plain old 4K as well, from a variety of cameras, because it was similar content to what I do now with Armando. And he was able to edit in Final Cut on that computer without too many issues at all, which is amazing. Like, if we tried to run Adobe Premiere Pro on his computer, I'm not really sure what would happen. It'd be crashes galore. We would have tons of lag, and it really wouldn't have worked. So Final Cut's actually pretty amazing. The other great thing about Final Cut that it has an advantage over Premiere, if we can just talk monetary for a second. Final Cut's one-time purchase of pretty reasonable, $299, whereas Adobe is a continuous burden to pay for, if you want to put it that way. So if you're not needing the other Adobe softwares, for instance, Audition, that's the one that I use the most. You can still do like Lightroom and Photoshop as a separate bundle, which is pretty good. I would highly suggest getting into Final Cut, especially as a first editor as well, because a lot of people can't always afford the latest and greatest computers. But if you're running any old MacBook, MacBook Pro, MacBook Air, Final Cut works amazing. And I think there's Final Cut on the iPad. Or is that a lie? That might be a lie. Don't hold me to that. But it's a really great system for quick editing. I think when I was working with my previous employer, we were pumping out 3 videos a week through Final Cut, which is insane. The turnaround times on those videos were insane. So I hope that answered the Final Cut question, or if we need clarification on that, please let me know. And hopefully we can do that for you.
And DaVinci Resolve is free.
And DaVinci Resolve is free. And
for those that don't want to spend any money.
Yeah.
And like I said, we have all of them. There's them all.
You're going down to the sidebar, but they won't be able to see it because it's through OBS and stuff. So sorry about that. We're trying to figure out this whole live stream.
I keep forgetting you guys can't see at the same time what we're seeing here. So.
No worries. No, I think that's a great point you bring up about the ecosystem in general, in addition to the subscription base versus a one-time fee. Now, you guys touched upon it earlier, and I think it's a really important point to kind of marinate on, is that we're getting into an age of 6K, where now even computers, it's like I have a 2018 MacBook Pro, and I start to wonder where if I want to dive into video, is this even capable, or am I going to be just beating my head against the wall, overheating, and is it going to be able to carry that? Now, are we getting into an age where video is developing so fast that if you want to tackle video seamlessly and put out professional work, where you're going to have to start transitioning to these more powerful systems?
I mean, having a powerful system is, and I'm going to use an analogy of a car. It's like having a faster car. It's nice to go through traffic and accelerate quickly. So yeah, having a powerful system does have advantages. Even when we showed you with the C200, the raw workflow that we had before we went on the Mac Pro, and he'll tell you, we could barely play on a PC, mind you. On a PC, we could barely play the C200. In fact, I've done videos on it. Again, if you go to my channel, there's a video why I switched to Mac. I think you just type my name on YouTube and type Armando, switch to iMac Pro. So initially before the Mac Pro, I switched over to the iMac Pro. And the biggest reason is because I had so much trouble editing C200 footage. And the thing is, I love the image quality that I'm getting from the C200. So, hey, I wasn't going to switch cameras. Camera's not the problem. The problem is my editing machine. So when I finally got an iMac Pro and I saw how it was like butter, obviously it made sense. But you know, the thing about, like I was telling you earlier, when I was editing the C200 footage on a PC, it just wouldn't work. Now you could see 4 streams of 4K footage in Premiere Pro without any issues.
But I think to answer your question more specifically, Derek, is basically you're asking, do I constantly have to buy a new computer to keep up with the ever increasing resolution that we're getting with these cameras? No, I don't think so. Just because of a couple of different factors that we have to consider. One is that 4K is like the new 1080. 1080 stayed around a lot longer than a lot of us even thought. And 1080 is still around and it's still prevalent. There are plenty of creators that only shoot 1080, and it is at no detriment to their content in an online space, especially on content or on platforms like Instagram, which is already just crazily compressed, right? You know, we produce these high quality, high resolution images and video work, and just to throw it up on YouTube and Instagram, and it just gets super compressed in all kinds of, you know, and muddy and all that kind of stuff. So why do we do it? We do it out of a sense of out of professionalism and the ability to do commercial work as well. But you don't necessarily need that. Also to answer Derek's question, is he has a 2018 MacBook Pro. I also have a 2018 MacBook Pro, and I have taken, when we had the C200, I have taken Armando's C200 raw footage home, and I have edited it on my 2018 MacBook. Was it fun? No, but it can do it. And that's an extreme example because that C200 raw, you know, if I had taken the time to convert that into ProRes, which again, I didn't do out of laziness alone, if I had done that, my workflow honestly would have been much smoother,
right,
and actually would have played back well. And again, if I was, because I'm using Adobe, if I had used Final Cut, I imagine that it would have been even faster still. So I don't think that we have to worry about that yet. 6K and 8K is the 4K of 10 years ago, or however long it's been. It's a novelty. It's something that we like. It's something that we like to use as editors to be able to reposition in a 4K timeline. You know, we're still using 4K timelines even when we're editing 6K footage, because it gives us the flexibility to move things around, digital push-ins.
Right.
That's why we use it more. No one's delivering 6K or 8K projects unless you're planning on filming for the Olympics, whenever that
And you know,
happens.
I see a lot of people also talk about how, oh, I don't want to transcode. It just takes, you know, too much time. You know, I guess I'm just speaking for myself, but I've never been in a situation where it's like, okay, gotta shoot, gotta edit like immediately and get it, you know, get that going. I mean,
Same day turnarounds.
Same day turnarounds. I mean, I guess maybe if you're shooting weddings, perhaps, or doing live events. But I think for me, or for what we do here, taking the time to transcode, and in our case, like I said, I was telling you guys earlier, it usually takes, depending on the project, 15 to 30 minutes to go from whatever codec that we're working with to ProRes, is definitely worth it because of the time savings. It's massive. Not to mention, you know, hitting the space bar for it to play back and having to wait 1, 2, 3, and then it starts to play back. It's just annoying. It's
yeah, and again, that's the render time on our Mac Pro, which is, or not, the transfer time on the Mac Pro, which is amazing.
Let's do a quick pre-render. Sorry, I mean, remember the pre-render. Let's do the pre-render
sure.
we could show you guys really quick the pre-render. We're going to go back to Premiere, and then we'll show you
myself. You guys see Premiere, but I'm the Final Cut. There we go.
Go to the other line. Yeah, Alexa.
Where did my timelines go? Let's see. Give me 1 second. I'm sorry, guys.
So what we're going to show you guys is just a quick pre-render between
do you want to see? The 8K?
Yeah, the 8K demo. Is it that one? Yeah, I guess you could do that one. So this is the ProRes. We'll do a quick, you could do an in and out so they can see.
Yep.
So we're going to do a quick in and out. It's the same, I think it's, what is it? Like how many seconds is it?
It's the
37 seconds. So it's a 37-second clip. We're going to pre-render the ProRes first. Go ahead and pre-render that.
Okay.
And then you can see here, it says 10 seconds. Yeah,
13, 10 seconds
right,
roughly.
which doesn't really matter because when you see the C200, you'll see the the massive difference. But roughly, it took about, let's just say 20 seconds. Okay, roughly.
That's pretty fair, I would say.
Okay, so it's done. Now let's go ahead and do the C200. Mind you, this is only a roughly 38, 37-second clip. I won't make you sit through everything. I mean,
Yes, on the previous one, time was 6 seconds. So we just did 20 seconds to take. That's a significant increase. This is one screen day, and you can see there is a significance. So just imagine if we were actually a massive.
Actually, there we go.
Let me go back to.
And we apologize if it was a bit choppy right now. I mean, the audio is because the computer's trying to do something, and then with the whole stream.
But just imagine for a second that we actually did have, let's say, a 15-minute YouTube video, sound design, color grade, graphics. Graphics kills edits on a lot of different computers, especially in Adobe. But if we had all that going on, the Mac Pro using ProRes would actually be able to process and play it at full playback. Whereas if I was using the C200 footage here, I'd probably have to put it in half to a quarter playback.
And just so you know, the C200 is a very popular camera that is widely being used today. It shoots 4K. It's pretty inexpensive for a cinema camera. So it's not like we're using something, we're not using red 8K footage to demonstrate this. We're showing you real world examples of cameras that people would buy today.
Although if we were using red, you could shoot ProRes.
Yeah, exactly.
So, you know,
yeah, that's right.
We wouldn't have that issue. But hopefully you guys can see the advantages of what ProRes can do for you, especially if you're working in the Mac ecosystem. Now, again, I will say that this now does work with PC. So if you do have PC, this does work. It'll just work significantly better in the Mac world, I'll put it. But it can work on your PC, and it's still going to be slightly easier than H.264, H.265 RAW for your computer to decode, process, and play back.
Yeah, I guess if you guys have any questions, we can.
Yeah, if anybody has any more questions, drop them in. I mean, I want to thank you guys again for joining us. I mean, what I'm getting out of it is it's a heavy duty workload when you're dealing with video. And it's the difference between kind of struggling through it and messing with your creative process versus a hot knife through butter, and really just being able to knock out content and not get caught up. I mean, I think we've all been there where we're working on that old dinosaur of a computer, and we're stopping every half an hour when it freezes or overheats and slamming it on the table. And this is something, you know, where in addition to the ecosystem, which is an added benefit where everything works hand in hand and it's seamless. And you know, these products are designed to function that way, you know, where you have that whole ecosystem and one thing is playing off the abilities of another. So.
Yeah, 100%. And it really is amazing what this Mac Pro is doing, because if you think about it, even right now, as you guys are watching this, the Mac Pro is taking the information from our camera, the C500, and is streaming that into OBS, which is then streaming that into Zoom. And that is also displaying Premiere Pro running multiple different timelines, 8K, 6K, 4K, ProRes, we got RAW, we have
Sidecar,
we have the Sidecar running,
which is sending this information.
I have Final Cut opened in the background, and these things are still playing, and we were getting 0 frame drops on the ProRes footage. This is not something that normal computers could do. Again, like the Mac ecosystem is amazing, but my MacBook, my 2018 MacBook, probably wouldn't like this. Derek's MacBook also probably wouldn't like this. So there are benefits to having something as powerful as the Mac Pro. It really creates a free environment for us to explore and try new things. This is something that, you know, this whole setup that we're doing right now is new to us. We didn't really know how this was going to work. We didn't know if it was going to get bogged down, opening all these different things, playing them all at the same time. And at least on our end, it's playing beautifully smoothly. I can't speak for Zoom. Zoom is kind of like it's kind of like streaming through any old video call app on your phone. It's not the best, but it is pretty amazing what we're able to accomplish.
I did see somebody ask if we are using the Afterburner card. Actually, we're not. So that's something that we do. It's going to be a purchase that we're going to do in the next probably couple of days, because as of recently, I believe I don't know if they already rolled it out to Adobe. I know it's on the beta version though. It takes advantage of the Afterburner card, which that means that everything that we just showed you is just going to be even better with the Afterburner card because of the whole ProRes. Yeah.
And Alvaro asked about, is it good to work with ProRes in Premiere Pro?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean,
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
Awesome. Yeah. I mean, Connor, it's like you said, going back to your point about everything it's able to handle. I mean, when you're naming, all the processes that you guys are doing right now through it, and it is pretty amazing that we're getting it on our side with, yes, obviously because of the bandwidth restrictions of Zoom, but that's a Zoom thing. But all you guys are able to do right now simultaneously, and let's be real. I mean, we like to multitask. We like to have 15 different programs. We want to have our Spotify open, and we're checking our email, and we're doing a million different things. We're not just having the programs that we're using at the moment open. Right. So the ability to do that speaks volumes.
Yeah. And not to mention, these are no cakewalk programs that we have open here. Each one of these isn't our email. This is different video editing softwares. And I imagine that if I wanted to, I could load up DaVinci Resolve as well. No problem. Throw some clips in there, and everything would also still run smoothly. Just listen, you can't hear the Mac. It's not screaming right now. It's not, the fans aren't turning like crazy. It's completely silent.
Yeah, I was going to say that. I don't hear any whirring noises over there. I don't see smoke coming up from behind you guys. So
you probably could hear my air conditioner more than the actual Mac.
Actually, that's probably true.
Now, again, thank you guys so much for coming on. It's great to see, not just specs and information, but to hear real world from guys who are out there doing it and using the systems and what you guys like about it. So, we'll stay tuned to see where we go from here. So we'll have to get you guys back on in the future, maybe 2 years from now, when it's video and computers are a completely different ball game. Now, we won't wait that long.
When we're doing, when we have our VR goggles on and I'm editing with my hands.
And I'm still going to have my 2018 MacBook Pro.
You will.
Still going to have it. No, so thank you guys again.
Video.
There we go.
Why I'm still using my 2018 MacBook Pro like 10 years later.
Yeah.
Exactly. So wonderful information. Thank you guys. As I told you before we went live, I love the setup you guys got over there. I'm sitting here and I'm like, man, I'm going to have you guys just come design my home setup. So
sure,
we'll talk about that off camera, but thank you guys once again for all of our viewers and those who did contribute questions. Thank you guys for watching again. As always, this has been another rendition of the B&H Virtual Event Space, and we will catch you guys next time.